We're in the midst of a special year in the church right now, a Jubilee year, which comes about every 20, 25 years, more or less. And this year's theme is the Jubilee of Hope. And we're kind of meditating on that more and more. I find how providential it was for Pope Francis to select hope as the theme of this year's Jubilee, because the reality is we could probably all use a bit more hope in our lives, whether that's great or small. And hope is something, it's more than just wishful thinking, more than, I hope it cools down, although we do hope that it cools down. Or, I hope that, I get this job, or I win the truck in the raffle. It's something, it's much deeper than that. There's a holy confidence in that we will truly possess all that the Lord has promised and will give us. Hope is that virtue by which we have confidence that we will one day receive all that the Lord has promised us. And really, when I think of hope, I think of today's solemnity as the fulfillment of hope in so many ways. Today, as a church, we celebrate the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about what that meant until much later in life. When we talk about the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, at the end of Mary's life, she was taken up, both body and soul, into heaven to be reunited with Jesus. Mary, who had really seen the whole life cycle of Jesus' life. She conceived him in her womb, gave birth to him, raised him, witnessed his passion, witnessed his resurrection, and then waited to be reunited with him. That all comes to a full today when Mary is taken up, body and soul, into heaven, into this beautiful heavenly reunion, a sign of true hope. But why is the Assumption of Mary a sign of hope for us? And really, I think the answer is because what happened to Mary is a prefigurement for what will happen to us one day. At the end of our lives, we will die, but at the final judgment, we will be reunited body and soul in heaven in full glory with the Lord. This dogma, it's one of the great teachings of our church, really solemnly defined not too long ago in 1950. But what it recognized is, so Mary, she was conceived without sin, meaning that she didn't have a stain of sin with her when she was conceived, the moment of her conception, throughout her life, whereas us, we're born with original sin. And while the effects are remitted by our baptism, we still struggle with the effects of sin. And one of those consequences of death coming into the world through sin was that our bodies, when we die, our bodies and souls will be separated from each other. Our bodies will remain here on earth, wherever we're buried, but our souls will go to their eternal resting place, and we'll be waiting for that unification of body and soul at the final judgment when Christ comes again. But Mary, not being conceived with sin, she didn't have to undergo that effect. And so at the end of her life, she was given that unique privilege of resting, of being assumed body and soul into heaven, reunited with her son, prefiguring the eternal glory that we will all one day experience. And that's all good and well. Mary is the spotless Ark of the Covenant. She had to be to bear Jesus in her womb. But you and I were not immaculately conceived. You and I were born with the stains of sin. Thank God, remitted by baptism. But it's still a struggle. We still have to fight. And one day we will die, and we'll be separated from our bodies until we are reunited again with them at the final judgment. But again, we turn to hope, because Mary offers us this hope in this great solemnity, because it shows that death isn't the final answer. Oftentimes we can think about in our culture with different trends and like philosophies or beliefs. Some people think death is like the end of life, and gosh, that's kind of a pessimistic outlook. If death is really it, I don't really know if I want that in my life. But thanks be to God, it's not. And Mary shows us this today. Because although we will die, we'll be reunited with Jesus in heaven and then eventually with our bodies at the final judgment, participating in that fullness of glory, of divinity, body and soul that Jesus had, that he offers us through the merits of his passion and death. But Mary, like a good mother, she's devoted to caring for her children. She doesn't stand there saying, I'm immaculately conceived, I'm better than y'all, get on my level. No. She is a mother who is caring for us and who intercedes for us. Mary, during her earthly life, she fed Jesus, clothed him, nourished him. She prayed for him when he went off to begin his ministry. She stood faithfully at the foot of the cross to watch her son die. And then she also was a witness to the resurrection and became a great missionary afterwards, praying with the apostles and waiting in hope to be reunited with Jesus. And now that she's with Jesus again in heaven, she's praying for us as her children. Maybe you remember at the foot of the cross, one of the last words of Jesus was, "Son, behold your mother," where Jesus gave St. John the Beloved, Mary, as his mother, but also us. We're now Mary's children. And she takes that seriously. And so she's up there praying for us and waiting for us to be reunited with her son. And thank God for that. Something else, too, I think that really makes Mary even more real and human to us was the reality that she suffered. She was magically conceived, but she wasn't exempt from hardship in her life. I was reading through the church's document which proclaimed this great truth of the Assumption of Mary. See how my Latin is today. Mudifecentissimus Deus. Call it like that. It speaks to how Mary led a life troubled by cares, hardships, and sorrows, and that, moreover, what the prophet Simeon had foretold actually came to pass. That is, that a sword of sorrow would pierce her heart at the moment of Jesus' passion and death. Mary suffered. She and Jesus, they lived in poverty. They had hope. They were waiting, and they knew their hope in the Lord. But they suffered. They know how difficult life can be. But Mary also teaches us how to hope and how to trust and how to have faith. She stood faithfully at the foot of the cross, watching Jesus suffer, and she was there praying for him and waiting. She was a witness of the resurrection and went out and proclaimed that truth to the world. And Mary was again gathered with the apostles, waiting and praying to be one day reunited with her son. Her hope came to a fulfillment, and from heaven she's here interceding for us that we too may hope. And knowing that we have a mother who's always interceding for us, it inspires hope. Knowing that God has prepared a dwelling place for us, just as he did for Mary, that inspires hope too. Again, that death isn't the final answer, that when we die we're not just going into oblivion, but we're going to a final resting place with the Lord. And knowing that God has destined us too to share in his eternal glory just as Mary did, this inspires hope and confidence for us that we have a place going forward, that our life has meaning, that it matters, and that we know where we're headed to. But Jesus, too, he knew as part of our hope that we needed something to hold on to while we're waiting to be reunited with him. And the most tangible sign of this hope is his presence with us in the Eucharist. I didn't really think about this until more recently, but Mary went to Mass after Jesus died. Because at the Last Supper, Jesus instituted the Mass. This is my body, this is my blood. And the apostles, they would celebrate what we now know as Mass, and Mary gathered in prayer with them. Mary would go to Mass, where Jesus would be made present in the Eucharist. Never thought about that before. There's a really beautiful painting of Mary adoring Jesus in the Eucharist. She's gathered her hands folded in prayer, adoring a host, Jesus present. And I find that so relatable, because odds are probably many of us, have at one point, been to Eucharistic adoration. If not, it's actually going on in the chapel right now, so you can go stop by and say hi to Jesus afterwards. But Mary would do that. Mary would adore Jesus present in the Eucharist while she was waiting to be reunited with him in heaven. And if it was good enough for Mary, it's good enough for us as well. And so again, this inspires hope that Jesus is truly present with us, that in receiving him in the Eucharist, we are set free from sin, we're united closely to him, and we're given that heavenly food needed here on earth to keep us focused, to keep our eyes on hope in him, trusting that we will be reunited with Jesus in heaven as Mary is now. So as we approach the Eucharist, I invite us to take a moment to think of one area in our life where we particularly need hope. Whether that's in our family, career, marriage, a friendship, it's back to school. If students are like, I need some hope to get me through this school year. If there's an area of hope where it's needed, to really bring that to Jesus in the Eucharist, because he desires to come into these areas where we most especially need his consolation, need his confidence, need the gift of hope. So let us approach the Eucharist in hope, asking Mary to intercede for us to come to the altar with us to receive her Son, and above all, living in holy confidence, trusting that just as Mary is now reunited body and soul with Jesus in heaven, so too we will one day. At the end of time, we'll be reunited body and soul with Christ forever in heaven, the ultimate source of our hope. Amen.
Amen.